Well, comrades, there need be no more equivocation about the seriousness of the economic crisis, because we now have it directly from our own dear government. Ed Balls, speaking a couple of days ago, said we now face the most serious global recession for, I'm sure, he said, no doubt about it, I'm sure, over 100 years. So let's permit us to congratulate them. 12 years nearly of a new Labour government, 25 years of New Labour venerating the free market, and this is their achievement, the most serious global recession for over 100 years. That's what all their promises of prosperity and freedom through the market and transformation and everybody moving up together have brought us to. And of course, there's plenty of evidence to back up what Balls was saying, a man who's been at the right-hand side of Gordon Brown throughout. The annual rate of decline of industrial production in December, 12% in a year in Germany, 20% in Spain, 21% in Japan. The scale of exports from South Korea down 33% in a single year. And Britain, of course, identified by the International Monetary Fund as the most vulnerable, not the best protected, but the most vulnerable economy to be swept away by that economic hurricane. And of course we know that that means in people's lives that jobs are going everywhere, from Woolworth to Corus to Ford to GlaxoSmithKline to Nissan, and a government that, far from protecting people from the jobs massacre, is weighing in with its own jobs massacre, not only in the HMRC and the civil service or the Department of Justice, but also in the post office. That we know that up to 16,000 jobs are threatened in Royal Mail, piling on their own casualties rather than protecting people from the effects of that economic crisis. And the reality is that that means wrecked lives, devastated communities, repossessed homes, people plunged into poverty and devastation for their families and communities. That's the reality of what this government is laying out for people, not just for a few months, but for years to come. If you read the other parts of Ball's speech, he said, for example, that the crisis might still be going on 15 years hence. That's their projection of the future. But also we've seen massive resistance, and here it's a privilege to be on the platform with the people who are part of that resistance. The mass strikes that we've seen in France, the mass strikes and street protests and student protests in Greece, the general strikes that we've already seen and will see more of in Italy, the student movement in Spain, the movement that led to the political crisis in Canada, the movement of students and workers and pensioners in Ireland. Mass strikes which I don't believe are a million miles from what we can see in Britain in the future. The possibility of huge numbers of workers taking to the streets and using their power. And that's what we demand of our trade union leaders here. Why can't we have the same sort of response to the crisis that we've seen in France and Greece and Italy and Spain? And we want it now to protect our jobs, to protect our jobs from what's going on. But also, as well as those mass strikes, there's what workers can do on a more local level. You know, the occupation at Republic Windows and Doors in America electrified the entirety of the American labour movement. A few hundred workers taking action. And I've been lucky enough to be going round with Donny and Billy today from Waterford. And it's important that we raise money for them, and I hope people will raise money for them. But that's not the most important thing that happens when they meet workers. The most important thing that happens when they meet workers is when they say, we're from Waterford, they came to close down our factory, and we said we're not having it. Yeah. And that's the message that we need to get out throughout the labour movement. It's a message that finds a very ready answer. Everyone says, thank God someone's standing up. Thank goodness they're not going out the factory with their heads down. Thank goodness someone said, here we are and here we fight. And it's incredibly important, therefore, that people give money to Waterford and support Waterford, but also they take the message of Waterford into their own workplaces, into their own industries, into their own unions, and try and follow in the same method that those workers have themselves. There is, I think, a deep mood for a fight back in Britain. We saw it in the strikes on the London buses, some of whose reps are here tonight. We saw it in the strike at Chemilines. We've seen it in some of the strikes in the council. I think we saw it not in quite the same direct way over the economic crisis, in the immense upsurge of fight back over the question of the invasion of Gaza by Israel. That it tapped into a mood of people feeling that society was falling apart around them and that they wanted to see a fight back over the great issues of imperialism, but also the way that capitalism was wrecking people's lives. We see that fight back, and there are obstacles to it. Yes, the union leaders who have held back some of those fights. Yes, those union leaders far too close to a Labour government, far more worried about the prospects of Labour ministers at the next general election than the prospects of their own members and their lives and their future. But we also need to ensure that those fightbacks are informed by a politics that unites people rather than divides peoples. And that brings us to the strikes we've seen recently on construction sites, power stations and refineries. There are real issues here. It is a real issue of the subcontracting regime across the construction industry. At Lindsey Oil Refinery, 236 companies engaged in that single project. It is a real issue where in some cases workers are used to undercut the rate and to drive down conditions and to break union organisation. These are real issues. They're ones that should be fought over. But I tell you, they can't be fought under the banner of British jobs for British workers. They can't be fought. The resistance to the economic crisis in Britain can't be fought under a banner that divides people. It's a slogan that draws a line through workplaces across Britain rather than uniting people across Britain. And I know that in many workplaces, whatever the detail of the dispute, what people see and what they hear is not the voices about subcontracting or undercutting the rate or the blue book conditions. What people see and hear is British jobs for British workers, and that's dangerous for our class and for our fight back. And therefore we have to insist that we want to unite people. But in many ways I don't blame the workers who held those placards, because those ideas didn't come from nowhere. They did come from Gordon Brown's speeches in 2007 at the TUC and Labour Party conferences, where he used that slogan of British jobs for British workers. So don't turn round now and use some sort of neoliberal fake anti-racism to denounce workers for xenophobia. When you raised the slogan, Gordon Brown, you popularised it, you brought it out. It's also true that too many union leaders have gone down the road of nationalism as well. That for Unite, it's unfortunate that the campaign that was raised around Peugeot was a nationalist campaign, not a campaign designed to unite workers across Europe. And it's also true that one of the reasons why workers end up in that situation is because there hasn't been a fight back over jobs. If there had been a fight back at Chorus and at Woolworth and at Ford and at GSK and all the other hundreds of places where there could have been a fight back, I think we would have a sense of a united movement, going forward together, fighting together and capable of winning together. And it's the lack of that that's causing the problem. And that's why we've produced the statement that I hope people will sign tonight, which is on these boards, which recognises the important issues raised inside the construction strikes, but also demands that we drop this slogan of British jobs for British workers and instead move forward on the basis of unity together. I hope everyone will sign it. I hope you take it into your union branch. I hope that you sign up online, and that therefore we can show that the core of the trade union movement is not going to go down this line. See, I think that we have to look at how it's possible to make sure that our movement raises its game over the next few months ahead of us, because this is a very urgent time. We haven't got years to get the fight back together. We need to do it now as the movement gathers around us. We need to make sure that we have a Waterford in Britain, and not just one Waterford. We want 20 Waterfords, we want 100 Waterfords, and we want those